yeah, Sithis is held in highest esteem because he's the one that causes the reaction. So Anuiel is also perceived of as order, or that's a bug or typo. Anuiel is also perceived as of order, opposed to the Sithis chaos. Perhaps it's easier for mortals to envision change than perfect stasis, for often Anuiel is relegated to the mythic background of Sithis' fancies. In Yokudan folk tales, which are among the most vivid in the world, Satak is only referred to a handful of times, as the hum. He's a force so prevalent as to be not really there at all. So Yokuda was one of the other continents on Nirn where the Redguard originally came from. I believe it sank into the sea a long, long time ago, though, which caused them to flee. So anyway, they're talking about how these dual forces, the basic forces of the universe, are perceived differently in different cultures. The two forces from which everything else sprang. In any case, from these two beings spring the Edada, or original spirits. To humans, these Edada are the gods and demons. To the Aldmer, or elves, they are the Aedra Daedra, or the ancestors. All of the Tamrielic pantheons fill their rosters from these Edada, though divine membership often differs from culture to culture. So all the different cultures, they like, basically they see these two same forces, and then like there was in this interplay in the gray maybe, other Edada came to be, the original spirits. But different cultures honor and recognize different spirits or different facets of the same spirit, or the same spirit by different names, so all the pantheons are different. So yeah, all of the Tamrielic pantheons fill their rosters from these Edada, though divine membership often differs from culture to culture. Like Anu and Padome, though, every one of these pantheons contains the archetypes of the dragon god and the missing god. So everybody gets these two. Everybody gets two. The dragon god and the missing god. So, you know, all these peoples, these various cultures, they all originated from some origin, right? Some small place where they were either birthed by the gods, or, you know, there doesn't seem to be evolution per se on Nirn, but there's this core in all of the different things that points to the origin, which is Anu and Padme, and then the dragon god and the missing god. So the dragon god is always related to time, and is universally revered as the first god. He's often called Akatosh, whose perch from eternity allowed the day. He is the central god of the Cyrodiilic Empire. The missing god is always related to the mortal plane, and is a key figure in the human Aldmeri schism. The missing refers to either his palpable absence from the pantheon, another mental distress that is interpreted a variety of ways, or the removal of his divine spark by the other immortals. He's often called Lorcan, or Lorcan? No, Lorcan. I say Lorcan. He's often called Lorcan, and his epitaphs are many, equally damnable and devout. So this kind of somewhat relates a little bit to the Nordic, or the, not the Nordic, I lost my train of thought. Let me just continue. Anyway, so there's these two gods usually referred to as Aktosh and Lorcan, although they have different names. One is related to time, and the other to the mortal plane. And the interpretation of like that Lorcan character, the mortal character, differs very widely between humans and elves. And it's interesting. It's like, you know, the god that everyone agrees the god is, you know, he's his thing. He's got time. But then the mortal character is the one that's subjective, the one that's subject to interpretation, you know? When somebody does something, and they do it for you, maybe you really like them, you think they're a great person, but maybe in doing that they hurt someone else. And that other person thinks, that's a bad person, I don't like them. You know, they hurt me. So that's kind of the fascinating part of the whole universe here, which is that the mortals affect the gods just as much as the gods affect the mortals. Everything is sort of mutually, I don't want to say the word synergy, but there's kind of a synergy there. Everything in this imaginary universe kind of influences itself. It's very like churning. All the reality changes all the time. And like even when it changes, it always was that way and always will be until the next time it changes. It's fascinating. I really love the core myths of this universe. It's really well thought out. So note that Tamriel and the mortal plane do not exist yet. The gray maybe is still the playground of the original spirits. Some are more bound to Anu's light, others to the unknowable void. Their constant flux and interplay increase their number, and their personalities take long to congeal. When Akatosh forms, time begins, and it becomes easier for some spirits to realize themselves as beings with a past and a future. The strongest of the recognizable spirits crystallize. Mephala, Arkay, Yifer, Magnus, Ruptgata, I don't even know how you say that, etc., etc. Those are various different, like, powerful spirits from the various different pantheons. Others remain as concepts, ideas, or emotions. So remember, there's no Tamriel yet. There's no mortal plane. There's just these forces and concepts and ideas that have these weird kind of, like, forms in this weird void. They're kind of, even though they're only symbolic, they still have form. That's kind of what I was trying to say before. Like, symbolism affects the world in this universe. So they're all kind of like swarming and churning in and against each other. Some like Anu more, some like Padume a little bit more, but they're kind of mixing and churning back and forth. And a few of the strongest ones crystallize. And one of the strongest of these, a barely formed urge, that's how he's first described, that the others called Lorcan, details a plan to create Mundus, the mortal plane. So one of these strong, powerful, concepts that is described as a barely formed urge crystallizes into a powerful being, and he comes up with this plan to create Mundus, the mortal plane. So humans, with the exception of the Red Guards, see this as an act of divine mercy, an enlightenment whereby lesser creatures can reach immortality. Aldmer, with the exception of the Dark Elves, see this act as a cruel deception, a trick that sundered their connection to the spirit plane. So this next part is a little bit more dry, but I'll try and get through it. Basically, this was written by the Sijic Order to explain the basics of Aldmeri religion to an emperor in Tamriel. So the myth of Orbis. Subtitled The Sijic Compensation, Mythic Orbis was an attempt by Artaeum, the home of the Sijic Order, Artaeum apologists, to explain the basics of Aldmeri religion to Uriel V in the early glorious part of his reign. It quietly avoided any blame or bias against the Lorcan concept, which was still held in esteem by the Cyrodiils as Shazar, the missing sibling of the divines. Despite this, the Sijics still give a nice summary of the Elder view, and it will serve our purposes here. This version comes from the archives of the Imperial Seminary from the handwritten notes of an unknown scribe. Mythic Orbis exists, and has existed from time without measure, as a fanciful, unnatural realm. Orbis is used to connote the imperceptible penumbra, that means shadow, basically, the gray center between the is not of Anu and Padume. It contains the multitude realms of Aetherius and Oblivion, as well as other less structured forms. The magical beings of mythic Orbis live for a long time and have complex narrative lives, creating the patterns of myth. These are spirits made from bits of the immortal polarity. The first of these was Akatosh, the time dragon, whose formation made it easier for other spirits to structure themselves. Gods and demons form and reform and procreate. Finally, the magical beings of mythic Orbis told the ultimate story, that of their own death. For some, this was an artistic transfiguration into the concrete, non-magical substance of the world. So some of the gods, or spirits, whatever, literally turned themselves into the flesh of the world, the substance, the matter of Nirn. For others, this was a war in which all were slain, their bodies becoming the substance of the world. So others felt like, I don't want to become part of this world, but somebody just stuck a magical spike in my face, and now I'm a tree. For yet others, this was a... sorry, I made myself laugh a little bit. For yet others, this was a romantic marriage and parenthood, with the parent spirits naturally having to die and give way to the succeeding mortal races. So some of those who died just viewed it as like, that's life, and this is the ultimate artistic act for us. We're immortal, we can live forever and contemplate ourselves, but the other thing we could do is give birth and become mortal ourselves and, give the world as a gift to someone else now that we've made it. The agent of this communal decision was Lorcan, whom most early myths vilify as a trickster or deceiver. More sympathetic versions of this story point out Lorcan as being the reason the mortal plane exists at all. So once again, the missing god, the trickster god, the mortal god, is perceived in a multitude of different ways, and all kinds of stories are told about him. Everybody loves him, everybody hates him. He's controversial. He's a man. The magical beings created the races of the mortal Orbis in their own image, either consciously as artists and craftsmen, or as the fecund rotting matter out of which the mortals sprung forth, or in a variety of other analogical senses, again, subject to your worldview. The magical beings, then, having died, became the Edada. The Edada are the things perceived and revered by the mortals as gods, spirits, or geniuses of Orbis. Through their deaths, these magical beings separated themselves in nature from the other magical beings of the unnatural realm. The Daedra were created at this time also, being spirits and gods more attuned to oblivion, or that realm closer to the void of Padome. This act is the dawn of the mythic or merethic era. It has been perceived by the earliest mortals many different ways, either as a joyous second creation, or especially by the elves, as a painful fracturing from the divine. The originator of the event is always Lorcan. So there's more here, but unfortunately we've run out of time, and I guess this book is much longer than I remembered, or maybe I spent too much time talking about it. But there's several different, what happens after the beginning part is that there's, I believe, 3 or 4 different creation stories that tell the same story as perceived by different groups. So you'll be able to pause this and read it. But basically what's going on here is that the Red Guard, the Cyrodiils, and I think the Elves have different versions of the same origin story. And you can see in those stories what this book, or what kind of the point of this book is, which is that everything is subject to interpretation. There's no hard answers. There's no black and white. There's only the gray maybe. Let's read the inscription at the beginning of the book one more time. In Mundus, conflict and disparity are what bring change, and change is the most sacred of the elven forces. Change is the force without focus or origin. So the humans and the elves have a very different take on reality. And that may explain some of what's going on with the war and why the elves are so angry about Talos, a mortal human, not a mare, being worshipped as a deity. Anyway, the rest of that book is fantastic, The Monomyth. I love that book. It's an incredible book. But I've run out of time, everybody, so that's it for this time. I guess when we come back next time, we're going to have to continue to explore Whiterun, meet its people, become its thane, and then we'll head out and liberate Hjalmarch. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that kind of explanation of the origin of the universe here in the Elder Scrolls. The Elder Scrolls themselves, of course, exist outside of time and don't come into that at all, but that's a whole other story, and we are out of time, so that's it for this time. Everybody, I've said that twice now, let's make it 3. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.